Now let's hop back across the pond and check out what was going on in our former motherland in an update to a case that we have been covering. On Tuesday, protesters took to the streets in the UK after body cam footage from their own police showed officers handcuffing and kneeling on 18-year-old baby-faced Henry Nowak as he lay dying from 5 stab wounds that were inflicted by a man who had falsely accused him of racism in order to dodge responsibility for his entirely unprovoked knife attack. That thug, 23-year-old Vikram Digwa, has now been convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, a word that maybe you need to define in Britain because he has a minimum term of just 21 years on a life sentence for murdering the promising first-generation college freshman in Southampton last December. This case has ignited a new level in Britain's national debate over policing, race, immigration, and the growing tendency among British authorities to give greater credence to allegations of verbal racism than they do to the serious evidence of physical violence that is unfolding right in front of them, like a boy dying of 5 stab wounds to his lungs. According to court findings, Digwa stabbed Nowak with the large ceremonial blade that he carries under a knife exemption that is granted to Sikhs, who, as a special group, are allowed to do things that are illegal for other Britons to do, such as carrying knives. After the deadly attack with that knife, which Digwa initiated by approaching Henry and declaring to him that he was a, quote, bad man, something that was caught on video, which the victim was making as he walked home. Yet after stabbing this boy 5 times for no reason, Digwa told police that young Henry had racially abused him and that he had acted purely in self-defense, which was belied by the fact that Henry was unarmed. Body cam footage that was released in the middle of the night after Digwa's conviction showed the officers arriving at the scene and accepting the accusation even as Henry lay bleeding on the ground. In that video, young Henry Nowak can be heard telling the officers, "I've been stabbed." And while they were very quick to believe the evidenceless and ultimately false claims of racism, no one took that stabbing claim seriously despite the blood. And one officer even responded to him by saying, "I don't think you have, mate." As the body cam footage continued to roll, Henry repeatedly told officers that he could not breathe. Yet he was handcuffed, knelt on, and informed that he was under arrest for the assault that had been perpetrated on him. Then Henry eventually lost consciousness while handcuffed. Police later removed the handcuffs and attempted CPR, but young Mr. Nowak died shortly after that. During the sentencing of his exploitative murderer, who used lies concerning racism as a weapon, along with his knife, Judge William Mosley flat out said that Digwa had falsely claimed that Henry Nowak had called him a racial slur. Then Mark Nowak, Henry's father, delivered an emotional statement after the sentencing of his son's brutal killer, rightly accusing British police of treating his son like a criminal instead of a victim, even as he lay drowning in his own blood, and all on the basis of a false claim that he had used a bad name in the form of a racial slur. He pointed out Henry did not die with dignity. Instead of being treated as a dying victim, police formally arrested Henry for assault and read him his rights. He contrasted his son's treatment with that of his killer, Digwa, who he pointed out was immediately believed by the authorities despite being the one who had stabbed another person, the only difference being the color of the two people involved. The footage of Henry Nowak's desperate pleas for life-saving help has triggered a fierce political backlash, with the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, correctly asserting, for anyone who has been following Britain for several years, that this case is just the latest demonstration of Britain's two-tiered policing system, which is based on race. And Farage rightly claimed that officers were more concerned about accusations of racist words than they were about a stabbing or about protecting a dying teenager who happened to be white, which, for unjustifiable reasons, made him a lower racial priority than his killer. The historically unpopular, I say that because according to the polls, he is the most unpopular prime minister in British history, Keir Starmer, acknowledged that this horrifying footage raised some serious questions about the conduct of police, and specifically he questioned how the allegations of racism may have influenced officers' decisions at the scene. Yes, that is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, all of which are entirely the results of your policies. You gotta love politicians being only about 5 or so years behind the public. The British Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood described the footage as disturbing and tragic, but argued and urged the public not to let this case stir up emotions that might disrupt the all-important pursuit of diversity in British communities. She warned that misinformation and threats that are being directed at police officers were only worsening an already volatile situation. Yes, the answer is not caring and blind compliance with wrongdoing. Those warnings did not calm the public anger of the British people, who have gone utterly unheard for far too long by their own government, and who continue to be shushed. So hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside of the police station in Southampton the day after the conviction took place and the footage went public in the middle of the night, chanting, "I can't breathe," and "Shame on you." By Tuesday evening, the crowd had grown substantially as protesters marched through that city carrying British flags and photographs of Henry Nowak. Officers in riot gear blocked access to parts of the city, and some of the protesters threw things at the police. The well-known anti-immigration activist, Tommy Robinson, addressed those protesters on the scene, while Elon Musk drew wider attention to this case online when he posted this on X on Tuesday, and it immediately racked up more than 28 million views. Send the video to everyone you know, showing how heinously Nowak was treated by the police in his dying moments, and how the police cravingly kowtowed to his murderer, adding that the legacy mainstream media, same ones who wrote about George Floyd millions of times, are dead silent about Nowak. Elon also indicated his support for the efforts to take legal action over the discriminatory response that was blatantly exhibited by police per their training. The Independent Office for Police Conduct, which is Britain's police watchdog group, is investigating the actions of the specific officers who responded to Henry's fatal stabbing that night. But as I said, they were following their training. That's where the problem lies. Hampshire police have already apologized for what happened, and one of the officers involved in this incident has since resigned. But that does not bring young Henry back. Apologies are not enough. Change is necessary. And it seems like it is going to be achieved one way or another, so I hope you choose the path of peace. And in the meantime, for many Brits, the central question remains unresolved. Why are their own police officers so willing to accept any unverified accusation of racism, while also entirely dismissing a teenager's repeated pleas for help after he had been stabbed 5 times? That question now simmers at the center of one of Britain's most politically explosive crime cases in the last several years.